Hi again, everybody. It's Randy Nonnenberg here with the Bring a Trailer podcast. I have Howard Swig with me. Hi, Howard.
Hello.
We are coming to you today with some excitement. We have an exciting guest today. We have Mr. Steve Dinan, who is with us, who has an amazing history with, particularly with BMW cars, but with all sorts of cars and racing. And certainly Dinan was one of the preeminent BMW tuners, and still makes a wild array of interesting parts. And he's also up to some new enterprises in the car and tuning and motorsports arena. And we'd love to hear about all of that. So Mr. Dinan, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Fantastic. Well, let's dive right in. We list many Dinan modified and Dinan equipped cars on BAT these days, which you may have seen coming across, and many of them sell for a premium when they have those, right combination of packages and components from your past and present. But I think a lot of people would love to know, what's your involvement these days with the existing Dinan enterprise and your new and different things that you're working on today? Can you tell us a little bit about what you're up to?
Yeah, I have zero involvement in the current company. I sold it 7 years ago to a private equity group who sold it again, and now it's owned by Holly Corporation, and it got merged with APR Audi. So the APR Audi folks are making most of the Dinan products. So I wish I was more involved, but I'm not. They don't seem to want my involvement after they bought it. That's their call. They own it now. I started a new company 5 years ago called CarBahn. Basically just a made up name because I wanted to get back in the car tuning business. I had a 5-year non-compete when I sold Dinan, which is now over. The new company is very similar to the old company from the standpoint that we have, factory matching warranty, but we're not just doing BMW anymore. We're doing BMW, Mercedes, Porsche, and Audi. So I wanted to branch out a little bit into other brands, and we're still involved in motorsports like we always have been. Right now, we're racing a Audi R8 in the WeatherTech sports car series.
Fantastic. Well, that's super interesting stuff. Seeing your former components on different cars and belonging to different people. I've always found it fascinating, tuners in particular, as they mature and sort of lead the market and then where they go. Obviously, you engineered a way to exit from that company at a particular time. And, the AMGs of the world that got swallowed up by manufacturers, and the Celines who kind of go build their own supercar. There's so many different paths, and but usually the owners of those and the sort of spiritual link to where they came from and their roots needs to stay close to cars and stay in that sort of arena. So it seems like you found your own way to do that with CarBahn. That's CARBAHN. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's basically car and Autobahn put together. Just to kind of give a feel for the new direction of the company. So Autobahn were the German cars, basically. I'm not the retiring type. As I tell people, I'm probably going to work right until the day before I die, and I'm going to be happy to do that because, as they say, if you do what you love to do, you're not really working. And I've always done what I love to do. Obviously, any job is work. There's always stress involved. There's always financial worries and those sort of things. But I'm a lucky person. I get to go to work every day and do what I love to do.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Well, some of those, earliest BMWs that you worked on, I grew up in the Bay Area and I love BMW. And so you and I had a little bit of overlap, and seeing that you did that, I very distinctly remember some of the first cars I saw with the Dinan, badge on the back that was in the same font as the BMW numbers on the opposite side of the trunk lid. And that was always quite a big deal. To see those, roaming around wherever they were and whoever was lucky enough to own them. Can you tell us a little bit about, did the car come from motorsports, did the company come out of motorsports, or did motorsports come out of building those fast cars? Can you tell us about sort of the early days and how it sprung about?
It's always been pretty much equal, both racing and street cars. I started the business in 1979, and I won my first racing championship in 1980, the following year. The first year was honestly just car repair. I was a BMW mechanic and going to college at night to be a mechanical engineer. I dropped out of school, quit my job as a mechanic. I went home with $5,000 in my pocket and a drafting table in those days. those old 90-degree arms with the mechanical arms on it. And I went and drew a part and sold it on a little postage stamp ad in the back of Car and Driver Road and Track. And then I made 2 parts and then 3, and just bootstrapped it by, coming up with great product that people liked and adding to it every month. A gentleman came along who was a NASCAR driver in 1980. And he saw the quality of my work and my creativity. He wanted me to get involved in his racing program. So I did that and engineered his car for him. And it was just SCCA Club Racing GT2, but we went out and won 7 out of 9 races, set 2 track records, won the championship in our first year, just in the local arena here in the Bay Area. So at that point, I was hooked on motorsports as well as high performance street cars and never looked back from either one.
That's very, very cool. What I was just real quick, I was going to ask him, what kind of car was that was campaigned?
It was a 2002, like a 1970 round taillight 2002 that had a racing suspension on and a side draft Weber motor that made 220 horsepower, naturally aspirated. It was a neat car, handled really well. And like I say, we set a track record at both Laguna Seca and Sears Point, which is now Sonoma, which is our 2 local tracks.
Steve, when I think of Dinan and motorsports, the car that pops into my mind is your E34 540i Dinan Turbo. I guess that was maybe a World Challenge car. Could you tell us about kind of some of your favorite race cars that you have built and supported over the years?
Boy, I've collectively, between club racing and professional racing and chassis engineer, driver, and team motor and engine builder, have won collectively 12 racing championships. Probably my favorite program is the one with Chip Ganassi Racing with the prototype cars, where he won 3 championships and they were the team and I was the engine supplier. And then we also won the 24 Hours of Daytona twice. The last car I drove was the one you're referring to, Howard, which is the 540 GT2 car that I ran in World Challenge from 94, 95, and 96. We built that car, built the engine, engineered the car, drove the car, and set it up myself back when the company was smaller and we had very, very little money. I think our budget was like $10,000 a month. But we believed in our capabilities and we did well. We got a lot of top 5s. We didn't win the championship with that car, but it was a really neat car. It made 750 horsepower, 900 pound-feet of torque back when cars weren't restricted like they are now. And it had an incredible amount of downforce. So, I mean, to give you an example, like Road America, it would do 180 miles an hour, 3 times a lap. So it was a fun ride.
When I think of kind of the most recognizable, eponymous tuners, I think of, Celine, Callaway, and yourself at Dinan. We have a huge following for the later model BMW stuff and a lot of enthusiasm behind the brand that you created. I think our audience would love to know kind of what inspired you in the 60s and 70s to get started. What other tuners and modifiers and anything else did you admire and kind of build your work after? Anything you'd want to share on that would be awesome.
Yeah, I was born in St. Louis. My father was an aerospace engineer for McDonnell Douglas. So I grew up with the space race, Mercury, Gemini capsule, and then fighter planes. But I always liked cars more like airplanes. My father wanted me to be an aerospace engineer. He was disappointed I got into cars because he thought they were low tech. And when I was 13 years old in middle 60s, I was born in 53. I went into a Ford dealership with my father, my brother, and I saw a 427 AC Cobra sitting on the showroom. It was like a white pearlescent color with a black interior, and it had like a gold rope with wooden stanchions around it and said a sign that said "Do not touch." And I didn't know anything about aftermarket tuners. And I asked my older brother, "What was it?" I go, "That's a Shelby." And I decided at 13 years old, that's what I want to do for a living. Not necessarily Fords or Cobras, but I just wanted to have my own brand like that was a really neat car that everybody would want to own and everybody would covet to stand around and stare at. So that was kind of like the impetus that got me going. Never met Carroll Shelby, but really liked his work. So I got drafted during the Vietnam War, unfortunately, and joined the Air Force, worked on airplanes for a while, and came out and went to college on the GI Bill. Got a job as a BMW technician, going to school at night. And I fell in love with the quality of German cars and the way they were put together, and in particular, the brand of BMW because of the way they wanted to make a sports car and a practical car at the same time. So when I started Dyna, my first tagline was performance without sacrifice. What that was supposed to mean was you had a sports car that had a back seat and a trunk. That was the lack of sacrifice. The consumer decided that meant it was a high performance car that had no compromise in reliability or drivability, and it kind of turned into that as well. But the consumer made their own interpretation of what I meant by the tagline, and so it sort of morphed into meaning both of those.
Interesting. What a journey. And I think that, yeah, I mean, many people see those cars still today and wonder about that relationship. I mean, it was so BMW centric, but you've said you've wanted to branch off, or now that you've branched off into other manufacturers, it's kind of less, Dinan / BMW, and now there's other things going on. Is that something, I mean, over the years, did you always want to do that and want to diversify, and for whatever reason stayed alongside with the BMW components just because it was such a good platform, like you said, with a back seat? Or was it some other thing that you were just like 100% BMW for decades? Walk us through that.
Well, I was 100% BMW for decades because if you go back to late 70s, early 80s, Mercedes were 240 and 300Ds, and Porsches were air-cooled rear-engine cars, which I thought were diabolical handling. And nothing against the brands, they just weren't like they are today. But and Audi was like 100 LSs and things like that. But over the years, over the last 30 years, all the car brands have gotten closer together from a technology standpoint, a quality standpoint. I'm not saying there's not a difference between them, but they're all really great cars. They all make good performance cars now. They all make really good quality cars. And so I think the difference between the brands is a lot smaller. I stuck with BMW so long because I had a relationship with BMW. It started in 1997, where they approved me to sell at a car dealership. At that point, we had reached between 2,000 and 3,000 Dinan cars a year, which is why you see so many of them around. And that went all the way up through, well, it's still going on today. That relationship between Dinan and BMW is still going on today. And when I sold the company in 2013, yeah, the company had gotten quite large and quite successful and as a recognized brand. And so I thought in order to be loyal to BMW that I would just not entertain other brands. But then when I sold the business, I got a job for Chip Ganassi Racing because Chip liked me. He brought me on board his place to launch the Ford GT program at Le Mans. And it turned out that job got given to somebody else in the company. I wound up doing some corporate relations work for him and things like that. But I really didn't like the job very much. I miss being an entrepreneur. So I came back and bought the engine shop back from my old company because they didn't want to build racing engines. They didn't want to build race cars. They just wanted to make tuner parts. Because honestly, there's no money in building race cars and racing engines. So they didn't really want that part of the business. I just sold it all to them together as a bundle. I bought that back and then I used that to launch the new company. And I decided this time around I was going to branch out a little bit because I really liked what Mercedes was doing with AMG. I really liked what Audi was doing with S and RSs. I really liked the new Porsches. So I went and bought one of each car and started a new company. So it's a very similar concept of, very high quality, factory matching warranty, superb drivability and execution, but just more brands.
Steve,
makes a lot of sense. Super interesting. Go ahead, Howard.
When you look back on your career, you've obviously done so much for both street and track stuff. Were there any projects, either racing programs or modifications to a street car that you said no to, that you said, well, that'll tank this thing, we'll go broke, or I don't have the time and energy to devote to that? Can you share anything over the years that maybe you walked away from that you say, thank God that was the right move, or maybe, well, that would have been pretty neat to try out?
There was a few things along the way. We were very close to closing a deal with, I can't remember the company that owns Java, to sponsor a McLaren F1 when I got done racing the 540 and GT1 at IMSA. Unfortunately, last second, the sponsorship program fell apart. I'm still disappointed about that. And because we didn't get that sponsorship, that sort of ended my racing career as a driver. It was going to be me and Price Cobb. If you guys remember Price Cobb from the old 962 Porsche days, me and him have been friends for a long time. We're still friends, and we were going to be teammates in the car. So that was kind of a disappointment to me. Also, I think when I was with Chip, I think Chip and I both hoped that we would get the GT program that Rahal has, that after winning 3 championships in prototype racing and 2 24s overall at Daytona, that we would probably get granted that entire contract from BMW, but they kept that program with Rahal, which forced Chip to move over to Ford. which wasn't necessarily bad. The Ford GT program was a great program. That sort of ended my my relationship with him from a motorsport standpoint. So those were disappointments. But, I've had a lot of, I don't know. I've worked hard. I wouldn't say it's been mostly luck. I'm one of these people who thinks luck is where opportunity meets preparation. So if you are very prepared, when an opportunity comes along, you appear to be lucky. So I've had a lot of luck from that standpoint, because I'm one of these people that works 7 days a week, 10 hours a day, and I like doing so. So I'm usually ahead of the curve. But there's always some disappointments along the way.
Yeah, those are a couple of interesting ones for us at BAT. As it has grown, it's been interesting to see the impact we've been able to have on the market. You obviously had a huge impact on the market. Do you remember from the early days, the first times, maybe you saw that your Dinan name either on a race car or on the back of a car somewhere influential, or some influential customer or something that you had that was sort of a like, wow, we're kind of making it to the mainstream and getting out there now. Do you remember any of those?
Yeah, when I first did tuner cars, of course, in the beginning, nobody knows who you are. And you have to create a brand for yourself, and without unlimited money, like I say, I started out in my garage at home. I had a hard time breaking through in the media. So my father had just retired from McDonnell Douglas, and I convinced him to take my race trailer and put an M6 turbo in it that I just finished and drive it to Michigan. And I drove around to Auto Week and Car and Driver and knocked on the door and said, "Hey, would you drive my car?" And this was Chubba Chet at Car and Driver, and I can't remember who the editor of Auto Week was at the time. And I said, "You drive my car. If you don't like it, I'll go away. You'll never hear from me again. If you do, I'll leave it with you." And they both drove the car and said it was amazing. And I left the car. And those were my first 2 big road tests. And the following month, after the media came out, and it was print media back in those days at Auto Week and Car and Driver, my sales doubled the following month. And I said, okay, we're going somewhere now. And that's what really made the business take off. And then, at that point on, we probably had a major story in a print media every year for the next 20 years. I think I had 13 covers, and I think I had 80 road tests total collectively. And they started chasing me down for cars. Once the reputation is there, it switches the other way. They're after you to bring them cars. But that was the start. That was the breakthrough move.
I love that. I definitely remember those days when they were chasing you for cars, and you would see all the, S1, S2, S3 comparisons, whether, I was into European Car Magazine when I was a kid, and then obviously all the bigger titles that you're referencing now that we're actually closely aligned with now with Road and Track and Auto Week and these Car and Driver titles. And they have archival stuff that I was digging around and looking at, the different Dinan features that have been done over the years. It must make you very proud to see, your actual last name emblazoned on so many of these cars, and the positive press, and frankly, the enthusiasm that it built in the BMW community. I remember it being, hand in hand. People were sure they were psyched about the M cars coming out, but they couldn't wait to see what Dinan was going to do with the E36 M3 when it came out, or something like that, right? People were sort of on their seat at product releases to see what happened.
And at some point over the year, we made somewhere around 36,000 cars collectively. So a fair number of cars. I think there was years we outproduced Porsche. As for car volume, Porsche is bigger now. So it was in the heyday, which was for us the 97 through 2013. We were putting out a lot of cars. We would own 10 cars at a time for development. I had 72 employees at that point. I had 3 buildings totaling 50,000 square feet. We had our own assembly line inside the building. It was pretty neat. It really was.
Yeah, I was there for a little bit of a part of that. And I know you managed your relationship with BMW and BMW NA and different elements of the company. And I was very green at BMW and was there, and I got to come to a meeting at your facility with a couple of BMW brass. And after it, I was told that I was too excited about it, right? I was like, I'm blowing their ability to negotiate with Steve Dinan because I love his stuff too much. I was told to basically chill out. And that I probably would not be invited to another meeting with the BMW Dinan relationship.
I had a lot of meetings like that with BMW, where one person at BMW would be super excited about the brand we were doing. And the next one thought we were the devil because the car was perfect and how could I dare tamper with it? So I got both reactions out of BMW, sometimes in the same meeting or the same day. Because as car guys, the BMW people really are car guys. I mean, BMW, one of the great things about BMW is they promote engineers up to management, and they're product people, and they like cars. And so as a car person, you can't see a BMW that's tuned to run better and not like the car, or you're not being genuine to your soul. Even if the corporate line is the car should be modified and it's perfect the way it came, you can't stop being excited about exciting car. So I would bring a car to BMW. In the end, when we got our relationship going, I started shipping cars to BMW. I'd ship them to BMW, let them drive them, and then I'm shipping to the media afterwards. I let the president drive the car around, a few other people in the company. And when I did that, the entire mood inside of BMW changed because they liked the cars so much, they couldn't help but fall in love with the brand.
It makes sense. It's ticklish though, right? I mean, it's a tricky relationship. And I think, the other tuners that Howard mentioned, they also walk that line. It's always, they don't necessarily want people to think that you can improve on their efforts that easily, but at the same time, you kind of can't deny that some of these modified cars are really compelling and wonderful.
Well, I mean, one of the things we always like to do is we're try and keep the character of the BMW, the refinement, the fit and the finish. A lot of the tuners, in our opinion, over-tune the cars, make them too rough and noisy and kind of ruin what makes a BMW a BMW. So we were very much of OEM style aftermarket tuner, I guess would be the right way to put it, more like an AMG or an Alpina than some of the people, in the business. Not really trying to make the most power, but trying to make the most refined, best car, something you could drive every day for 125,000 miles. I have to tell you a funny story of the first time I went to BMW, and it's before I had our relationship, and I was trying to get there, and I had spent years just trying to get in the door. And they finally agreed to have a meeting with me, and they sent the workshop manager over, which is, ran their analysis for warranty in New Jersey, and his name was Winfried Schimpf. I never remember. Clearly, he'd race cars. I could tell that. And he came over to the main office and picked me up, and I had an M6 with me. And he gets in the car. He's very stiff. He's got a suit on, and he gets in the car, and he drops the clutch and does a burnout. And he's sideways through the parking lot. He goes up this ramp into the workshop and does a handbrake turn in the workshop, gets out and goes, yes, very good. Very stiff like this. And he puts the car in a rack, and he looks at the car, and he calls on the phone to his boss upstairs. His name is Hans Dunzel, who was in charge of engineering at BMW at the time. And he says, so what do you think? He says, well, he's very nice work, very good car, but he's an American. Worst of all, he's a Californian. And I wasn't sure what that meant at the time. And he said it in German, not knowing that I knew what they were saying on the phone. So I pretended like I didn't know what they were saying. But in the end, Hans Dunzel was kind of negative toward my relationship with BMW. In the end, sort of became a friend and became a fan. It took a few years to get him there, but we got him there.
That's really funny. You had mentioned some of the really impressive figures as far as a new car production when you were really rocking and rolling. I have to imagine at some point, there were so many Dinan modified cars in circulation that perhaps parts availability and support for what are now used cars maybe becomes a bigger focus of yours than the new car side. So how did the business evolve specifically related to supporting all the customers with what sounds like tens of thousands of Dinan cars that are getting miles poured on them and needing all sorts of different custom Dinan parts?
We were very big in support for the older cars. So I kept all the fixtures and all the instructions for every car I'd ever made. And when I owned Dinan, you could call and ask for a part for a 25-year-old car, and we could make a replacement part and get it to you. In fact, for current cars, we had a 97.5% fill rate within 36 hours on parts. And we could make anything within a month from scratch because we had all the fixtures. Because we didn't want any old Dinan cars to be broken and not be repaired. It was kind of a pride issue. When I sold Dinan, I didn't think the new company was going to want to keep up that level of support for old cars. So I tried to get them to give me all the fixtures and instructions for all the old cars, which were handwritten in binders back in those days. And these fixtures were welded together out of hunks of steel and on a plate to build like downpipes for turbos and things like that. But they made it clear to me that they bought the company and this all belonged to them. They took it with them. Unfortunately, they have not kept up with support for older cars. What they did with the fixtures and the instructions, I have no idea, and I find that disappointing. And because I love the old Dinan cars to stay in good shape. If somebody wants to send a car to me, I have fabricators that work for me that used to work at Dinan when I sold the company, and they moved to Alabama and joined APR. A lot of my folks didn't want to go to Alabama, so I hired them all. So they all work at CarBahn. So most of the people at CarBahn are old Dinan employees. And they all remember what we used to do. And if you send me your car, even though I don't have pictures, I can hand make something for any car and restore it to what it was. But I would have to see the car to do it.
Interesting. Sounds like an interesting dynamic there, frankly. And they are certainly, I believe, still selling components with your name on. How do the name rights work? If you don't mind sharing that with us, if people you said you had a 5-year non-compete for the business, which has now lapsed, but I don't think you're allowed to call something a Dinan component that you install. Is that right? Did they buy that as well?
Yeah, they own the name. I sold the brand, so it's their brand now. So it is my last name, but I'm not allowed to use it in a company anymore, which is kind of a weird thing. You can't use your own last name, but it just is what it is. And look, they paid me good money for it, so it's theirs. They're still in business making parts. They boiled the business down to the bolt-on parts, software, intake and exhaust, springs, and we always did that. And honestly, that's where the money is, and that's why they wanted it. But I also did racing and engines and motorsport engines and more exotic one-off cars for media and things like that I just did for fun. I never really started the business to make money. I mean, I made some money, of course, but that really wasn't the motivation. The motivation was just to make a better car every day. And we thought if we did a good quality job and we provided good customer service, that we would make a profit as a result of that, which turned out to be true. And I guess we could have probably cut out all the things that were a waste of money that were just fun things we wanted to do. And we probably could have made more money, but money really wasn't the reason we were there. Of course, you have to make money to stay in business. We were there just to make really cool cars, and money was almost a side effect of doing it.
Makes sense.
Once you sell to a private equity group, then the focus becomes money.
Yeah,
that's a different goal. And look, everybody in business wants to make money. That's why you're in business. But we would certainly waste a significant amount of money every year on exotic things that sometimes didn't pan out, sometimes did. My wife, I used to keep every experiment I ever made in a room that failed, just as to remember what I had done wrong. And my wife one day indicated to me how much money I'd wasted on all the stuff that didn't work. She was my accountant, so she kept track of all the money I wasted. But she supported me greatly over the years. She let me pursue my dreams. She still is today, when I should be retired, letting me pursue my dreams in motorsports. And she certainly didn't have to be so cooperative, but she's been a great wife. We've been married for 46 years. So
congratulations. That's good to have that support along the way in such an interesting and sometimes volatile business.
Yes.
What do you think about BMW and doing, performance tuning today and the model lineup? Obviously, I think BMW today is a very different company and obviously a different expression of the brand and what they've stood for over the years. Some people are very down on that and like, oh, new BMWs, look this way and perform that way, or they're kind of a volume manufacturer. Obviously, when you were doing things with 2002s, it was the wildly other end of the spectrum. But even in the 80s, right, when they were putting out E30s and E34s and this sort of stuff, pretty different company. So what are your thoughts on either working with them today or just, Steve Dinan's thoughts on, the performance potential in the model lineup?
I don't work directly with them anymore. I make products for their cars still, but we don't have a relationship like it did with Dinan. BMW has kind of gone the way of all manufacturers, and not necessarily their fault. Honestly, it's Mercedes is the same way, and Audi. The regulations for crash requirements for airbags and backup cameras and infotainment systems that customers demand inside the car have made all the cars rolling electromechanical devices that are almost need an IT person to operate the car. There's so many networks inside the car, and they've gotten heavy. All the cars have been. And the technology is, in order to stop people from crashing accidentally with stability control and traction control and ABS and everything, it's sort of made all the cars, not just BMWs, numb to the driver. And I was reminded of this recently. One of my race car sponsors as a young kid was racing an F2000, and he just turned 16. He'd been racing go-karts for a while, and the father wanted him to get a car, and he wanted me to recommend one. So I recommended an E46 M3. And they found a really nice used one with low mileage, like 40,000 miles on it. And I put a neat suspension on it. We left the motor and everything stock. And I hadn't driven one in a really long time. And I made a one-off suspension system just for this car. I probably spent about $10,000 on the suspension system on the car, using all my expertise. And I drove it home a couple of days, and I must say, I forgot how much fun old BMWs were to drive. The car is so raw and so connected to every one of your inputs. And while it doesn't have the power of the modern car or the sophistication of the modern car, it is absolutely the funnest car I've driven in 10 years. I don't like the car so much stock, but once I got done with big wheels and tires suspension system, the car was so much fun. I tried to talk my wife into going out and letting me buy a low mileage used one and making it for myself as a commuter car. But I own way too many new cars, and I was told that there was no more room left for any more cars in the household, so I didn't get one. But it was really a neat experience. It reminded me where BMW came from. And it's not just BMW, it's all the car manufacturers. They've all had to go that way due to regulations and consumer demand. So I would not really blame BMW for the direction they've gone. It's just society and where we are in the auto industry. And we're about ready to go through a big change in the next 10 years. Most of the cars are going to get paid with electric cars. I mean, that's where we're headed. I know people don't want to hear that are into gasoline cars, but 10 years down the road, when solid state batteries come out and all the electric cars are making 1,000 horsepower and all-wheel drive, and most of the governments of the world don't want the pollution and the environment from the petrol, the world's going to change again. Whether that's better or worse, I don't know. It remains to be seen. I hope I'm around to witness it and enjoy it.
Well, that's so true. It's kind of the old saying, if you asked Henry Ford what the people wanted in 1900, he would have told you faster horses.
Yeah.
So, the world is certainly always evolving. I wanted to ask you, I mean, you're obviously an engineer at heart. I just did a quick search. We've listed, looks like 61 Dinan modified cars on Bring a Trailer over the past several years. Each of those have really rich discussion threads around engineering and reliability and all the improvements that your parts provide to those cars. But the other side of that is kind of the marketplace and what these cars are trading for. Is that component of interest to you? Do you follow kind of trends with your cars trading hands on the secondhand market, or is that less of interest to you?
I'm more interested in what I can make next and what there's old ones are selling for. I am aware of the fact that the resale volume is quite good and actually going up. And honestly, even when the cars were almost new, the resale value was good. We would typically sell Dinan cars even just 2 or 3 years old, just out of warranty, for 50% of the modification cost plus whatever the blue book was. So if the blue book of the car was $60,000, the customer spent $40,000 modifying the car, you would get $20,000 of that back on resale value, on top of whatever the car went for. So the Dinan cars have always had good resale value. Now the older ones are becoming collector's items, and a lot of them are selling for more than they've sold for new, which is really neat to see. I'm proud of that. And most of the aftermarket brands don't have that kind of history, that kind of resale, because the quality of the workmanship and the brand name just isn't there.
Yeah, yours were certainly at the upper echelon. One of those, Howard, that kind of made a milestone moment was, I think, an E39 M5 that had the full Dinan treatment, and was a really low mile and wonderful, sold for what was sort of unheard of for that model at the time, this being a year or two ago. And now I think people are a little bit more comfortable with that being a collectible model and drawing that sort of interest and a price tag as such. So I think the Dinan equipped cars will be appreciating as time goes on as really special examples, because I think people like Howard and I and others in our BAT community sort of recognize the effort that you put in, the words you're talking about, even just the taglines and the reliability and all those sorts of things. I think people will remember that for a super long time. I think it's super interesting what you say about the future and where things are headed. Can you talk to us about any projects you're working on right now? I know you guys have the workshop in the Bay Area and a suite of components and tuner parts that you're using on some particular models. Can you tell us about anything that is upcoming that we could be looking forward to or seeing that you're involved with?
Yeah, July 1st, we're launching F90 M5 and M8 intercooler, heat exchanger, software suspension, 900 horsepower, all-wheel drive, phenomenal suspension. I have an M8 Comp as my daily driver now, and I've been driving around racking up miles on 40 cents a median. Just super fun car. And with the all-wheel drive, and I'm finally glad that BMW and almost all the manufacturers have gone to all-wheel drive. With the power that modern cars make, you need all-wheel drive just to hook the car up the traction is just not available to a two-wheel drive car to have cars making 800-900 horsepower, 800-900 pound-feet of torque. And even the OEM cars are making 600 and 700 horsepower now. So two-wheel drive is just not adequate for that. So it's about time the manufacturer's gone on board with that. I'm very excited about the new all-wheel drive M3, M4. And we're starting on that car as soon as we're done with the M5, M8 project, which we've been working on for about a year and a half. And we're also working on a couple of new Mercedes. I don't want to say what they are yet, but we're working on a couple of Mercedes, and we also have a couple of projects of Audis in the works right now too. And then of course the WeatherTech sports car R8, which we just started our first race in Mid-Ohio 2 weeks ago. So that was fun too.
Fantastic. Are you out at the track doing that, or are you guiding people from sort of the mothership? Or tell us about the R8 that's going to be racing.
I'm the car engineer. I'm the setup guy. So I'm the one that makes the car handle. We won the championships in IMSA GT4 and GS in 19, and we almost won it back-to-back in 20. We finished second because we had a small mechanical problem at the last race, or we would have won 2 championships back-to-back. And now we've elevated ourselves up to the WeatherTech series. But all along, I've always been the car engineer. So, most tuners, in fact, all tuners I know of, go hire a race car engineer to come set up the race car. I'm a good enough engineer that I set up my own race cars, and I beat all the people that hire engineers of their own. So that's what I really like doing is setting up a car better than everybody else. That's is my joy. I've always made my own cars, my own engines, and set up the car myself. But now with the modern car, the engines are sealed. You have to buy factory cars. They're all regulated under the BOP. So the only thing you can do anymore is car setup. But that's okay. Car setup is actually my best skill. I also call the race. I do the strategy. I wear the headset. I call the pit stops. So I'm very much involved. It doesn't run if I'm not there.
Nice. And what's the livery on that car? What does it look like? How can people recognize it if they're out at the races?
It's black and gray. It says CarBahn on the side of the door, and it's number 39. Okay,
fantastic. Excellent.
Well, they're all on NBC Sports these days too, by the way. NBC Sports Network, all the WeatherTech races.
Yeah, that's a good plug. Those are sports car races are fun to watch. They've always been fun to watch for me and the association they have. I know they're not road cars by any means, but seeing an R8 race is often more interesting for me than seeing something that looks, a little bit more extreme or open wheel racing. It's fun to associate the brand and the components in it and see how they relate to street cars. So I love that you're involved in that. That is pretty amazing that you're out there with the headset, the guy on the pit wall or in the team quarters, calling the shots.
Yep.
Super impressive and compelling. So I appreciate you plugging that and also telling us about CarBahn. It's an interesting new chapter for you and always interesting for us to just sort of follow you and what you're up to. We really appreciate you making some time to chat with our folks today. And if they're looking for you, I'm sure they can find you at carbahn.com. Is that right? And maybe where else?
It's carbahnautowworks.com. Yeah. And watch the race on NBC Sports Network. The WeatherTech races are phenomenally close. To give you an idea, at Mid-Ohio, there was 13 cars in the same 7/10 of a second on lap time wise, which is pretty tough competition. I mean, there's literally hundredths of a second per grid position on the grid. So you can be a second off and you're last, just to give you a perspective on how tight the group is. So you better be on your game.
Wow. That's quite a compact run list there at the finish line. So anyhow, yeah, we will definitely be watching it, and we certainly appreciate your time today and love seeing dining cars within the BAT community and them talking about it. So appreciate you here, and we will maybe circle back. I'd love to check out some of those cars at your shop. It sounds like 900 horsepower in an M8. Sounds totally crazy to me, but if we could be part of it or see one of those come across the list at BAT, we'd love to see it.
Yeah, if you want to come by and take for a drive, I'm happy to set you up with that. We could put a V-Box camera in the car, and you can shoot some video too.
Fantastic. Howard, there's your invite, buddy. Sounds like that's
there you go, Howard.
No, that one's for you, Reddy. No, Steve, thank you. We have such a huge BMW following, and you are such a legend to so many people in both the BAT community and elsewhere. So I think people are going to be absolutely thrilled to listen to this podcast and hear from you directly. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys for making time for me. I appreciate it.
Okay, you bet. I hope we can do it again. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for listening. straight from the horse's mouth, Steve Dinan. He has been there and done that in the BMW tuning world and the horsepower production world, and we owe a lot to him in terms of thanks for that. It's been a fun ride, and there's more to come. So we will see you on the next BAT podcast. See you then.